In the year 1942, there was an outbreak of plagues that took the life of many people in China. Over 200,000 people died in this plague. But what if I tell you that this plague isn't a natural disaster? This plague is a man-made disaster made by a single unit in the Japanese Imperial Army known as Unit 731. Now, everyone here knows a little bit about Japan. They make anime, Mario, TVs, Sony and everything. But nobody really knows of Japan back in the World War II period. They were brutal, they were vicious, and they had a dark side to them. Now, as somebody that studied in Japan for a couple of years, as well as have an interest in World War II history, I'm here to inform everyone about the Holocaust that nobody never heard of. In this speech, I will be talking about the man responsible for it in the beginning of Unit 731. And then I will talk about the experiment conducted by Unit 731. And lastly, I'll fill up on a bit of the aftermath. The leader of Unit 731 was this man known as Shiro Ishin. His nickname is Doctor of Death. He is born in 1892 in a Japanese noble family. Back in that period, the nobles of Japan were taught that their life is more important than that of a common man. So this will sort of factor into his twisted, the thing he would do in the future. Ishin studied medicine. He is known to be a medical prodigy. He caught the attention of a high-ranking Japanese officer while he was studying in the Kyoto Imperial University. He was transferred to an army medical school in Tokyo with his tuition and everything paid full by the army. When he graduated, he became a doctor and he quickly rose through the rank of the Japanese Imperial Army. Ishin is a pretty weird guy. He loves bacteria. In his free time, he would cultivate bacteria and then call it his pet. However, even though Ishin is a doctor, he is not very interested in healing others. He is more interested in experimentation as well as studying. Ishin eventually used his privilege in the ranks to travel the world. One of his favorite places to visit, as well as a place that would kickstart the event of Unit 731, is Germany. When he was in Germany, he learned of the gas weapon, a biological weapon that was banned during World War I, and Ishin thought to himself, why was this weapon so dangerous that the world will ban it? So Ishin started thinking that he wanted to create a biological weapon that surpassed all others. So he went back to Japan and asked the emperor for funding as well as the construction of a facility. Needless to say, the emperor granted his request, and now we'll move on to the terrible experiment that was conducted in the facility that would be known as Unit 731. Unit 731 was built in 1936 in northeastern China, near modern-day Harbin. It is disguised as an epidemic prevention and water supply unit. The whole campus is built like a concentration camp, including a holding cell for 600 people, a laboratory for testing, experimentation, as well as a huge crematorium for disposing of the waste. And for the next 9 years, the Japanese military police would arrest any random civilian and sent them to Unit 731 as test subjects. Some of the terrible experiments conducted there include infecting a subject with mutated strand of bacteria. Once the mutated strain of bacteria are mutated in a way that they're much faster acting than others, once the symptom has shown up on the victim, the doctors would cut them open without the use of anesthetics, as they believe anesthetics would affect the result. Some other experiment Yixin had conducted on the site include, it's simply for his curiosity. One of the more brutal experiments he would conduct would be cutting open a pregnant woman to see how reproduction works. Another experiments they conducted include blowing up a victim, blowing up random subjects to study the most efficient way of causing damage to the body. And in 1942, the most terrible experiment conducted by Yixin happened. At night, planes dropped plague-infected fleas containing mutated strands of dysentery, chloride, and typhoid over a village in northeastern China. More than 200,000 people died in this event. Oh, actually, sorry. They would, afterward, the doctors would show up and conduct and dissect the victim out in the open in front of their loved ones. As we see a picture there. Another one is the victim of the said bacteria. Now, fortunately, the war ended before the plague bomb was ready to be used. However, not all story has a good ending. And I will now talk about the aftermath of Unit 731. At the end of the war, with the surrender of the Japanese army as well as Chinese army successfully driving the Japanese army out of mainland China, Unit 731 was forced to surrender. However, Yixin, prepared to be sentenced to death for the war crime he committed, like many of the Nazi soldiers before it, did not get what he expected. Instead, the US has offered a pardon as well as $250,000, which is equivalent to about $2.7 million in current currency, in exchange for his research data. So, the research data, the legacy of Unit 731's experiment allowed a huge advancement in the field of medicine, including creating vaccines for a lot of common diseases known to mankind. The Japanese government refused to acknowledge Unit 731 until the year 1998. It's only recently that they disclosed the information. So, in conclusion, I talked about the founder and the birth of Unit 731, the horrible experiment conducted by them, as well as the aftermath. Now, having informed everyone about Japan's own version of Holocaust that very little people knows about, I would like everyone to keep in mind that every country, doesn't matter how bright they look, has a dark side to them. Thank you.